Well, welcome everybody. Ignite Power Session number 4. I appreciate you guys. I've seen a lot of familiar faces come through here. Just to recap, the first piece was just kind of wrapping our head around what we're going to be doing and the industry. The second one was kind of the business in an overall general sense. And then the third one was talking about, lead generation and powerful lead generation through your database. So as we go and as these Ignite series kind of paint this picture, the way that I kind of like to look at it is that the first 3 sessions are all about kind of getting yourself started, as well as the integration of lead generation. So you have to be doing both. And I'm going to say it probably over and over again on these videos. You have to be setting up your business as well as working in your business or lead generating. And so the first 3 sessions are all about kind of that starting phase. And if you guys recall back to the funnel, and I'm going to skip down here real quick just so we have a visual. If you recall the funnel, we've been working on kind of building that business and lead generating and actually getting people into our lead pipeline, our lead database, if you will. Today, we're going to be working on basically seller appointments and how we tackle seller appointments, how we tackle the consultation. So I really want you guys to ask any and all questions. There's multiple different ways to skin cats in this industry. I'm going to go over kind of a lot of what this class talks about, as well as in conjunction with what I talk about. But if you've heard anything different, if you use anything different, chime in. This is where we really get interactive with these things. This is where we're really out beating the pavement. This is where the work begins. This is where you have to start to know how to talk to people. And today we're going to work with sellers. We're going to go through that process. We're going to understand how a seller thinks. We're going to understand some powerful ways and questions to build rapport and relationship with a seller to make sure that they know that you're the right professional. We can go through scripts around objections. We can talk about commissions. We can talk about all of that. So as we go through this, if there's any stone that I leave unturned, reach out, let me know, put it in the chat box, pause me, stop me. But this is going to be awesome. So to recap, and I'll just scroll back up here, you guys should be doing daily lead generation. I would say at the very least, 2 hours a day. Right now with our market and our environment and not having the ability to do open houses and networking events, I would venture to say if you're bored, you need to be working 4 hours a day on lead generation at this point, right? We're 4 weeks in. We're talking about winning with sellers. Make sure you're tracking. Make sure you're doing those calls. Make sure you're working on your scripts, okay? Being outside of the classroom, it's hard for me to hold you guys accountable and check in on your daily 10-4. But make sure you guys are consistently doing that. Is anybody struggling with lead generation and kind of balancing between lead generation as well as just learning and educating yourself and getting started? Great. I know you guys, I know it's a struggle. I know it's overwhelming. And I know that you're going to hear me say it over and over again. Do both. I don't care how long it takes you. Start your feet off the ground right. Start with the right habits. All right. Session 4, getting into sellers. When we focus on listings, a beautiful thing can start to happen. And it's what I would call more of like the snowball effect. You can do it with buyers as well. However, listings are a little bit easier to start this snowball. And what I mean by that is listings drive leads for you, right? There's a multiple ways that you can use your own listing to grab other sources of income or other clients, whether it be buyers or sellers. One is with a sign in the yard and online presence. You could easily have someone call you about that home that's unrepresented. The chances of them buying that home are very slim to none. But again, they could be calling you because they're unrepresented and they're thinking about buying a home. They're very interested in your home. They may want to set up a showing. That's one of the number one ways listings will grab attention and will start to grab more leads. So that's really for a sign in the yard is really for a buyer, an unrepresented buyer to call you. I'm going to go off on kind of a safety little tip here. Let's say, and I'm gonna pick on Jeffrey. I don't know what it is, but you are always like right underneath me. So I just pick on people in order of video.
Right under your wing. Yeah, take me under your wing.
Good, good. No, you're very interactive. I love it. So let's say that Jeffrey calls me, or let's say I call Jeffrey and I want to go see this house. Jeffrey, what are some things that you can think of, or some ways that you can vet me to understand if you want to take the safety risk of showing me a house and I'm just a stranger on the phone? What are some questions that you would ask, and how would you handle that?
Oh wow! Yeah, first want to get a sense of the time frame. Do you want to role play this, or just kind of go through the idea of the kind of
No,
the principle?
let's hold off on role play. Just rapid fire
Okay.
with me, whatever you can think of. So
Okay.
time frame, that's good, right? Because you don't. If somebody says, "Yeah, we're going to be looking to buy a home in a year," and they're a stranger over the phone, do I really want to meet them I don't really want to meet them at the house just for the drive time, as well as safety, as well as why are they looking at homes if they're a year out, right? So I'm really going to push. That's really good. So timing. What else can you think of?
Oh, financing, pre-approval or even a pre-qualification. Definitely first on the list, maybe.
Perfect.
Although not necessarily the first topic you want to bring up, but definitely want to get a sense.
You know, and it may be one of the first topics that you bring up. I will. I mean, there's so many scam artists out there. There's so many people calling and asking, telling us agents that they're part of, the association or the Colorado Real Estate Commission. There's so many scams going on out there, and it happens with sign calls and listings as well. People steal, people lie, people cheat. So this conversation, it's hard when you're first getting started. It's hard when you don't have a whole lot of leads and business coming at you. And it's very exciting when somebody calls you on your first listing. But I will tell you, more often than not, every single time I have ever actually made the decision to go show somebody a house that I didn't, well, one, I don't show anybody houses I don't feel confident or comfortable with. But two, even if they tell me all the right things, they're pre-approved. They send me an email saying they're pre-approved. I look them up through my security website to see if they have any felony records on their plate. I can do all of that, and that still makes me nervous. So for me, if I'm going to choose to do that, I choose to do it with a buddy or another colleague. So bring a friend, bring another real estate agent. Safety in numbers really helps and works. And when you show up to a house and they're expecting to do something a little shady and there's two of you, they're much more likely to walk in, walk out, and move on. Be careful, okay? Because when we talk about listings, we're talking about grabbing some leads. And grabbing some leads means we might want to do something that we know we shouldn't do. So on a sign call, it's very important that you ask those questions that Jeffrey just went over. You ask them to come into the office to have a consultation before you would meet. Because the reality is a sign call, it is so rare that somebody is pre-approved, ready to go, not working with an agent, and is that ready to write an offer on your listing. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Usually people get pre-approved and they start to look for an agent, or they start to call around. So sometimes it does happen and you could have that viable buyer, but if you're really good with your scripts and you're really good with what you say over the phone, capture them for an appointment at the office first and then set up the showing for your listing. And so a script behind that is, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I really appreciate the phone call. Just because I'm a professional and I love what I do, I think what we need to do is we need to meet at the office first. I'd like to go over kind of a little bit more about the buying process and situation, because the last thing I want to do is go and waste your time out there showing you a bunch of houses if we're not quite ready or know the process. You see, it's a busy market out there right now, and there's some strategy around different properties and different possible multiple offer situations. So I really want to make sure we can go over that before we go out and take a look at this property. But in the meantime, what I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to maybe set up multiple different showings for you. So if you're willing to meet with me at the office, I'm actually willing to set up multiple different showings on my listing as well as a few others. Did you have any other addresses in mind you'd want to take a look at? And then you're giving them something, right? You're giving them more opportunity to see more properties and more houses. You're showing them that you don't just represent the seller on that on your listing. You can work with them on a different sell, if a different buy. So that's that combination of that script is you got to get them in, you got to make sure that you know who you're dealing with. And then if you feel comfortable, take them out and show them property. Make sure you use the buddy system, but listings grab leads and grabs attention, and it's very exciting. So be careful. Okay. So that's how listings can pretty much primarily bring buyers. How do you think we can pull listings off of a listing? Any ideas?
By visiting the neighborhood, homes that are in the proximity, just to let those neighbors know that
Yes.
that is available and that you're available for them as well.
Perfect.
People that are looking to buy a house may have a house to sell.
Yes. Yes. You could get the double-sided. You could get that sign call from a buyer who needs to sell their house. Correct, Grady. Yes. And correct, Jeffrey. You need to make that neighborhood know that you are the expert in that neighborhood. Make them know that you are there, you are ever present, and that if they're even thinking about buying a home, they should look no further, because the things that you're going to do for your seller is exactly what another seller is going to want you to do. So when I'm going around and I'm what we call canvassing a neighborhood, if you're door knocking or if you're sending out a postcard or maybe you're calling the neighborhood, you need to make sure that your conversation and or your message really comes across that you're the expert in the neighborhood, right? This is what you do. You proactively prospect for buyers for your home, right? We're gonna get into some scripts and we're gonna get into some scripts in a little bit around what you need to talk to or what you need to do with a listing. So remember the 5 P's of real estate. I actually just said one of them. You're going to proactively prospect for buyers in the neighborhood. You need to make sure that they understand that if they listed with you, you're going to do the same thing that you're doing on this other listing for them in order to capture the attention. That goes a long way. The other thing to note is that listings, traditionally speaking, have a ton less time involved with them than a buyer. So because you have more time, when you have a listing, you have more time, it means you have more time lead generating for the same dollar. So make sure you're not faltering and make sure you're not failing when you have a listing and you're not out showing a buyer day in and day out, house after house, 20, 30 minutes away from where you live. That's time saved on a listing that you only have to go visit the house maybe once or twice, right? Put the sign in the yard and take the sign out of the yard, hopefully, or 2 or 3 times, right? Go to the house. Maybe you can't get the listing signed and maybe you have to come back and get it signed and put the sign in the yard. Either way, it's a maximum of like 2 to 3 times at the listing. Unlike a buyer, you're at, 5, 10, 15 different houses sometimes. So make sure that, when you have a seller, you're not just, taking your foot off the gas as far as lead generation. So there's multiple different ways. So great job. All right. So we have a seller, right? We're talking about everything we need to do with a seller. We know that listings are important now, but how do we engage, right? We're going to start this as like a kind of a flow today. A realistic experience. So let's think of a scenario. Let's pretend that through a friend of a friend of a friend, somebody got my name and information and is thinking about buying or selling their home. Let's say that they're selling their home to relocate across the country. And let's say that the relocation is not job related. but it's family related. It's not really a dire need. It's just a want to get back to across the country. Okay. So not a lot of motivation, but we're going to try and pull it out. We're going to try and spill it out. And what happens here is, I'm just going to give you guys the precursor, but when we answer our phones, typically we have no idea that same scenario that I just went over with you. Okay. So I just wanted to give you the scenario so that way you guys can kind of see how I would interact with a seller. And Sarah, are you on mute? Okay. Do you mind? Do you want to role play with me today a little bit?
Are you okay if I just observe and take some good notes?
Yeah, I'm okay. Brady, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll give it a try.
Okay. So I'm going to be the agent. I just want you to kind of be a seller, and I want you to be the seller, and I want you to just kind of take that situation. So you're moving your family. Let's just say you have a wife and a kid across the country. It's not for a job relocation, and it's not for a dire emergency. It's just more for a want to get back closer to family.
Okay.
And you look like you're probably low 30s, mid 30s. Let's just keep you at that age, so that way we can just kind of tag off of that.
Okay.
And then basically this is what I said, this Ignite stuff, we really get into the meat of it here. And so as I go with Brady, we're going to kind of scroll through here, and you're going to see me kind of pause and take a tea. We're going to kind of quit role playing, and I'm just going to kind of explain a few things, and then we'll jump back into it. So this will be kind of interactive. If you're okay with that, Brady, you're going to be on quite a bit.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. So Brady and I are going to have our first conversation here in a couple seconds, and I need to be ready. I need to be on my game for when somebody calls and they're looking to. I mean, think about it this way: when somebody calls and they're having this conversation on their mind, they want you to be ready to have that same conversation. So, I mean, there's a few days ago where I was fishing and I got a call from a buyer. If you take a call, make sure you're ready, because this buyer was hot. This buyer was hot to trot. And I feel like if I were to just say, hey, I'm out fishing today and I'll call you back, there's a very good chance they would not be with me right now writing an offer this morning. That's how hot this lead came to me. And so what I'm getting at is whenever your phone rings and you find out that it's a lead, either one, nip it in the bud right then and there and let them know that there's a better time to talk, or two, be ready to have your scripts ready, have everything on your A game, and tackle that conversation. Okay. So we're going to talk about pre-qualifying the seller. So the seller is going to call me. They're going to start to list the home, or they're going to start to talk about listing the home. Brady, you can be kind of hard on me, but let's keep the conversation moving, if you will. You don't have to give me everything, because people don't give us everything with sellers. And I talk about going 3 questions deep all the time. With sellers, it's even more important to understand the situation. A buyer, you can fumble through, right? You can get through it, and you can go through some trial and error of, oh, I apologize, I didn't have that in your search. I didn't have that set up. I didn't, I didn't know that that's what you were doing, right? You can kind of talk through that. With a seller, it's so important to make that professional impression off the rip. And the way that you do it is through a combination of what I would say like 3 different things, okay? With a seller, pre-qualifying, you're going to want to find these 3 things. 1, why are they moving? 2, you want to talk more about them, like them as a person, and figure out who you're going to be working with. And 3, you want to know more about the house. So you got to try and figure out all 3 of these pieces, and they're all 3 of them have their own different kind of importance levels. 1, why are they moving? That's the motivation piece, right? I'm giving us a scenario on this video to be a little difficult, because I'm going to teach you guys that if you can't find true motivation in buyers or sellers, but more in more particular cases, sellers, if you can't find true motivation, it's going to be very hard to convince them to list their home and put it on the market. Unlike a buyer, they have security. they have a roof over their head that no one else is going to take from them until they make the decision to get rid of it. And that can be scary, but that means also we need to find that motivation. On a buyer's side, you know, they need motivation too, don't get me wrong, but they probably have something usually lingering over their head. They're not building wealth for themselves. They have a lease that's coming up. Rent is going to be increased. There's an outside factor that's causing them to make some moves probably, right? So as we pre-qualify a seller, we have to go through and we have to make sure that we ask a lot of questions, and we want to make sure that we tackle motivation, the house itself, as well as who we're working with. We need to know who these sellers are. And the sellers will come out. I don't really ask a lot of questions about the seller, but I ask a few. So let's jump into it. This would be what I would call more of a pre-qualifying the seller role play here. And I'm going to pull open this. If you guys don't have this, you can download it through Ignite Series Session 4. This is just a simple, basic, generic pre-qualification walkthrough for your seller. There's a couple of different questions that if you guys want to write down, I ask that are not so spelled out in here. I really like to go 3 questions deep when I talk to any buyer or seller, but specifically sellers. So, hello, Brady. Hello, Brady. This is Bruce. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well, Bruce. How are you?
Awesome. Hey, I appreciate you calling. I was kind of made aware that you might be calling, but I tend to not ask a lot of questions, but I really appreciate you giving me a call. So tell me what's going on. What kind of real estate assistance can I do for you?
Well, I'm not, in a huge rush to move from where I am now, but we are just putting our feelers out there, just trying to see what's in the market and maybe what we can find.
Okay, great. So you're looking to sell your home?
Yeah, at some point for sure.
Possibly, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And as far as selling your home goes, how long have you been thinking about this?
Probably past 4 or 5 months or so. It's kind of just been a discussion here and there, but I think we're starting to think about it a little more seriously now.
Ah, nice, fantastic. And when you say we've talked about it, and there's a lot of we in there, is this a spouse?
Yes, my wife. Yep.
Your wife. What's your wife's name?
My wife's name is Meg.
Meg, awesome. And do you have any kids?
I do actually have 2 kids.
You have 2 kids. How old?
One is 11 and the other is 8.
Nice. And I would get their names right there too. And I would say something along the lines of, is there any other, decision makers in the family? You kind of go, I don't know sometimes if I go that deep on the first call, but you definitely want to make sure that you kind of understand who's living in the house. Awesome, Brady. Well, hey, I appreciate that. I look forward to meeting your fam at some point in time. As far as talking about this over the last 4 and 5 months, what has prompted this sale? Are you guys looking to sell and then move in the area? Are you guys looking to, relocate due to a job, or tell me more about that?
Actually, it's partially due to a job. So, it's a change in job, but it's also a change in scenery. We've been here for a while now, so we're looking to kind of change things up.
Nice. And hypothetically speaking, perfect world, where are you going to be landing?
We have family in the Longmont area, so we were kind of browsing around there, but I know there's some beautiful areas, that surround there. So I think we can, it'd be nice to be within that 30-minute range of my job, but it doesn't have to be necessarily.
Okay, great. I'm going to just pause just for the video's sake. Let's say you're moving across the country.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, cool. So you're moving to Baltimore. You have some family in that area. Did you grow up in Baltimore?
Yes, I did. So I lived there for about 15 years, and now I'm just looking to be closer to family since my family's grown.
That's awesome, man. Well, hey, no, I totally get that. And now I completely understand and see kind of why, these are big talks, right? You're moving across the country. You have 2 kids. I mean, that's not an easy headache to overcome. I don't think there's enough Advil or aspirin at the store to do that, especially when you guys don't, buy and sell homes every single day. So anyways, yeah, I just want to make sure that when I ask all these questions, I kind of match your energy level and your intensity. Because if you need to get out to Baltimore next week, uh, we're going to have a different conversation today. But if it's just to move out there to, get back to your roots and see some family, that's a really important thing. And I want to see that happen for you, because quality of life is so important. And what I've learned is that if you rush yourself into this, the chances are you and Meg just kind of draw the line in the sand and say, you know what, this is just too much. There's so many unknowns. We're just going to stay here. So if we take this process and we take our time with it, I can assure you, you'll be out in Baltimore before you know it. But we'll also take our time, and we'll also make sure that we go through and understand that, you know, um, time is of the essence as far as, getting you guys out there and having a quality of life. But yet, this could take a few months, right? So
Absolutely.
hypothetically speaking, do you still see yourself in do you still see yourself in Longmont? Let's call it next 4th of July, or would you need to be in Baltimore by then?
It'd be nice just to be there for the holiday, and to enjoy it with family. It doesn't have to necessarily be then, but with everything that you said, the headache of moving and all that kind of stuff, I could certainly, it'd be nice to be there before holidays.
Okay. And that's exactly why I ask, because what I've found sometimes to be most enjoyable is to have all of this stuff kind of done and wrapped up. And you could either one, enjoy the holidays it's only August right now, Brady. So you could one, enjoy the holidays in Baltimore, for, Christmas and New Year and Hanukkah. I'm not sure exactly what you celebrate, but at least, the New Year's and Thanksgiving. Or, what I find people do is maybe get ready and we get their home sold and you move to Baltimore sometime in the spring, and then you can enjoy all summer. Either way, I want to make sure that whatever we do this, it's not like you're moving like the day of Christmas or like the heat of summer. So, would it be pretentious of me to ask if you're looking to get this thing going, would you guys love to be, in Baltimore by Christmas?
I think we can make that happen, as much as I look at it and say, this is really stressful, it'd be nice to just get it out of the way and have that stress out of the way.
And that's kind of what I hear. And that's honestly, that's what I do for people. I moved across country myself, Brady, a few years back to this direction. And I'll tell you, I didn't have kids, and going back and knowing what I know now, um, my gosh, would it have been nice to have somebody kind of take some stressors off my plate. And so that's why you're going to hear me ask a lot of questions. I pride myself on making sure that transition for you is going to be flawless and smooth, at least in my realm, right? I can't guarantee those movers. Those darn movers, I'll tell you what, it seems like every time I've got something lined up for a seller, they cancel, they bail, they show up early, they show up late. Anyways, I'm going to take off any headache that I can, minus some outside sources. Um, so yeah, with that being said, do you have a couple of moments that I can ask a few more questions?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So I'm just going to pause right there, and I'm just going to kind of go over kind of some of the rhymes and reasons around what you guys saw me do. I got to know him. I got to know his family. I tried to pull out some motivation through, next year. Did you notice how I went from next year and then I backtracked to Christmas? Whenever I'm talking to a seller, the last thing I want to make them feel like is that they need to get out of their house tomorrow. And so usually if I go out about a year and kind of walk backwards, just like a buyer kind of, it takes that pressure off. I got to know his family, names. I brought up the stress of, I was stressful when I moved out across the country, and I didn't even have two kids. I'm planting so many of those, like those clammy feelings in his mind, not to force him to say, I want to stay in Longmont. This just is going to be too hard, but to say, I'm talking to the right person, because he knows that would be hard for me, which means Bruce is going to take care of me, and he's going to make sure that the things that he does for the sale of my home are the things that I don't need to worry about. I need to worry about getting my family across the country. I now have just envisioned myself in Baltimore on Christmas morning with my family, my kids, and my extended family that I'm going to go see. So that's what I'm doing right there. And then did you notice how right there before I paused, I segued with, it sounds like, we could get started. Do you have a couple of minutes that I could ask you a few more questions I don't think I said about the house, but typically I would say about the house. So I'm getting motivation in him, that first little segment. And now I'm going to ask about the house, and I'm going to still continue to draw off the motivation as well as the house, right? So if you just go through this sheet here, we may or may not have already talked about how did you hear from me. For the purpose of this video, I didn't want to have that conversation, but you definitely want to know how they got your name and phone number, right? If it's through a friend of a friend of a friend's referral, it means you don't know this person in the slightest. And so to backtrack that line will really get to help you understanding who's out there promoting you and your business. And those are your A+ clients, especially if somebody can get a friend of a friend of a friend to call you. That's incredible. That's awesome. Where are you moving, right? We already went through a lot of these questions. So now I'm going to ask kind of more about the house that they're going to sell. And I'm going to ask more about, that piece around making sure that they've thought through a lot of these different things. Okay. So Brady, yeah, I appreciate you having a couple more minutes with me. Let's just jump right into, I guess, kind of what your house looks like. And the first question I'd like to ask is, how long do you think it'll take for you to get your home like cleaned up and ready to be shown and to be sold?
We keep it pretty neat and tidy, so I imagine it'll only take like a week or two, maybe even shorter.
Okay, awesome. And I asked that question because sometimes people have some projects that they want to do, or maybe they're in the middle of a project. So that's great. If you guys keep it pretty much show ready, at all times, the only thing other that we kind of ask you to do, or that we encourage you to do, completely up to you, but we call it depersonalizing the home. So when you sell your home, it's great if you could be able to take down kind of all of your personal and religious effects. So things such as, wedding photos, family vacations, anything in the house that is only specific for you. We really encourage you to take those down. Now, thinking about how you live and how your house is, do you have any religious or personal effects that you should probably take down before a buyer would come in? Because we really want a buyer to make sure that they see the home in a manner in which they could live. And if they see too many family photos, it can really make a buyer not feel like they're at home. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And, we do have some family photos around the home. But I guess, the good thing about that is we'd be getting a head start on the packing. So.
Perfect. Yeah. So what I hear you saying is probably wouldn't take you more than an hour or two to just kind of take down some family photos.
Yeah.
Awesome. So with that being said, I kind of want to walk you through some of the timeline. I'm going to, again, ask you some more questions about the home. But what we would do is I would come over, take a look at your home, and go over kind of what we call a CMA, or a comparative market analysis. Now, this CMA, or comparative market analysis, is data that I compile based upon sold properties in your area that have similar specs to your home. This is what we're going to use to basically get us a very close or a good range for where we might list your home. Usually what I like to try and do is a range of maybe 20 to 30,000. And the reason why I want that range is because we need to see where your home stacks up in conjunction with the other homes that have sold in the market to really pinpoint on the actual, list price of the home. So does that make sense, Brady? There's kind of two prices to a home. You have your CMA, which is based upon or driven by sold data. And then there's the other price of the home is what the market or what buyers will pay for your home today. Since this is sold data and the market today and now could be just slightly different, I need to get into your home to kind of give you a best estimate of where I think a buyer would pay for your home. And hopefully it all lines up with our comparative market analysis. But what I'm getting at really is the visit to your home the first time around is really going to give me the vision that the buyer is going to see. And that's so important to me. It's so important to me. So I would draw up a CMA and I would bring it over to you and I'd buzz around the home and we'd talk more about price. We talk about the process and things of that nature. So with that being said, in order for me to do a CMA, I got to ask you, have you ever finished the basement? Have you guys done any renovations or improvements to the home that would A, cause the value to go up or down, or B, is there anything that you've done to the home that I might not be able to find in public records?
Let's see. So we did do an update on the kitchen, and we did remodel one of the bathrooms. The basement is not finished. So I think maybe in some ways we may have added some, but maybe the basement takes away a little bit. I'm not sure.
Perfect. Well, hey, you know what? I love the way you just used two different words right there. You said that you updated the kitchen and that you remodeled the bathroom. I was just about to ask about that because there's just those two things mean a lot of difference to me. Updating the kitchen is one where you kind of keep the layout and you may add new cabinets, but a lot of times it's like new countertops or you painted the cabinets, put new hardware on, maybe a new sink, upgraded the appliances, but really the functionality and the layout stayed the same. Is that kind of what you guys did to your kitchen, or did you guys kind of gut it and actually like remodel it, like knock down a wall and things of that nature?
Yeah, we kind of just update. We just threw some paint on the cabinets and changed the knobs and the handles on the doors and replaced the oven. That was pretty much it.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Good. That's exactly what I would consider updating. And so, tell me about the bathroom remodel. Was it in all bathrooms or just one?
Just one, just the master.
Just the master. Did you guys reconfigure anything, or I guess did you guys turn it into a five piece? Tell me more.
Yeah, so we added, we have a bath and a shower now, and we didn't really have to move much, but we definitely added some new light fixtures and just made it a little more open space. So.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, hey, I look forward to seeing that. Cool. Is there anything else that you guys did to the house? Do you guys have any sort of like, let's call it like the mechanicals or the shells? How was the furnace?
The furnace is fairly, well, I guess it's about 10 years old, so I'm not sure how that stacks up.
Okay. So I'm just going to pause. I would ask about furnace. I would ask about water heater. I'd ask about the age of the roof, the siding, if it's painted or vinyl. How long ago has it been painted? Um, Obviously, I'm going to ask for the address, and then I can find the age of the home. I'm probably going to ask the age of the home just because if it's built before 1978, I'm probably going to have a lead-based paint conversation with them. Just because it's a good piece to be that professional to go, oh, your home was built in 1968. Well, I don't know if you know this, but it may or may not have lead-based paint. We need to make sure we disclose that to the buyer. Anything built before 1978 will have to have a special addendum attached to it. It's just where it's a simple fact that we know, but the common homeowner doesn't know or probably doesn't remember from when they bought it. And so you want to ask those kind of questions and those nuances. So I like to ask more about the features and alignment with the public records. And then also at the same time, just kind of really reiterate that if there's anything that they've done, they need to let us know. And then lastly, I kind of go to like the overall shell, the things that people don't think about a lot, like windows. Like a lot of times people will put in $20,000 windows, and that's a big thing to know when I'm doing my CMA, right? Not that you can go out and grab a CMA and understand that the homes had new windows or they didn't, but just that when the CMA says top dollar is $475 with or without new windows, you might have to have an uncomfortable conversation with them about how, a $20,000 window, they maybe only be able to stretch another 10,000 out of the market. So those little different things that people don't think about as being updates or remodels, like roofs, furnaces, those sort of things. Those are big ticket items that really will indicate where you price a home. And if some people get resistant, and we're going to go kind of into the actual consultation with the seller, but when you ask a seller, when a seller goes through and they know they need a new roof, their windows are leaky, they haven't put the paint on the exterior, their furnace is 23 years old but still kicking just fine, and maybe the only thing they've replaced is their water heater. To a buyer, those 4 items alone add up to usually the swing or the sway of your actual range. So again, I like to get a range of comps between 20 and 30,000 because a new roof could be 10,000. right? A paint job on the exterior could be 6, 7, 8,000. A new furnace, a new AC, that could be another 10,000. You see how those little items right there can add up to that $20,000 to $30,000 swing? But the rest of the house could be beautiful. Like, one of the hardest parts about this industry is you go into a house and they just redid everything. Brand new kitchens, bathrooms, flooring, crap. They even took down and knocked down a wall and opened up some things, and brand new appliances and hardwood floors and fresh paint. And I mean, the entire inside looks just completely done up, maybe even $100,000. The problem is that person's going to probably want the top dollar for their home. And if they need a new roof and a new furnace and all of that stuff, they're really going to take away from what a buyer is willing to pay once they find out all those things, right? They could get it. They could go under contract, get their price. But as soon as a buyer does an inspection, a good buyer and a good agent's going to realize quickly that, yeah, so what? There's a $100,000 remodel in here, but over the next 3 to 5 years, I'm going to have to sink another $30K into my own cash. So going through and asking those questions up front, first and foremost, are some of the most important things. And this is where I was telling you guys earlier, we want to get to know our seller, right? And this is where you got to get to know that kind of those mentalities. This is where we can, I hate to say it, but we got to start to judge who we're talking to, right? If I get on the phone with Brady and he's talking to me about all of the bells and whistles in his home, and then I start to ask him about the mechanicals, and he's like, yeah, the furnace is 35 years old. The roof, I don't even know. Roofer said I could probably claim hail insurance, but that was like 3 years ago. I never went and did it. But I put granite in the kitchen. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to walk into some place that somebody's going to want top dollar, and you're really going to have your scripts ready to kind of not bring them down in price, but just set an expectation around, you may get top dollar, but beware that a buyer's probably going to hit you for a new roof and this and that. So that's why we ask all these questions. Does that make sense as far as pre-qualifying goes?
Yeah, it's just like making them aware of the reality of the situation, as opposed to like just looking at their home and be like, oh, wow, like I've done so much to make this thing look beautiful.
Yes, exactly. But throughout that conversation, we learned all of that about the house, why they're moving, where they're moving. We set up that pain versus pleasure. The pain of not selling your home before Christmas means you don't get to spend time in Baltimore with your family. And then through a series of questions and answers, I got to know more about Brady and his family. I got to know more about why they're moving. I got to know more about the house. And so now when they don't even realize, and I say they don't realize what you just did was you set yourself up for nothing but success when you go to that appointment. Nothing but success, because now you pretty much can tackle about everything, unless they start talking to you about commission and stuff like that. Usually over the phone, I don't talk about commission at all. So when you go into your listing presentation at the house, there's not a whole lot left that you're not aware of or ready to tackle. Okay. So that's why pre-qualification with a seller is so important. With a buyer, a lot of your pre-qualification, that happens at the consultation, right? That's the biggest difference, I think, between buyers and sellers is buyers, usually I pre-qualify a buyer like in depth like that at the consultation. A seller's got to be over the phone. That way you know what's going on.
So
right.
When you talk to sellers over the phone, it's usually a lot longer of a conversation, correct?
It's so much longer. Yes. Okay. Now, with that being said, Tim, I'm giving us an example for the video of a first phone call because Brady called me.
Yeah, I get that.
So if I'm getting Brady's name and phone number because I just got wind that he's thinking about selling, but I don't know anything else, the first conversation might be just as quick as just calling like a buyer internet lead or something like that.
Gotcha. And do you always try to go in that order of motivation and getting to know them like a little bit personally about their family and then getting into details about their house after? Or does it sometimes
usually because I don't want to spend 30 45 minutes on the phone talking about their house. If the conversation goes, Well, we're just thinking about it. I can't believe Bill. I can't, I can't believe I'm calling you. Bill just told me to call you, but we're really going to probably be looking like, maybe, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years from now. We don't really want to move yet. My daughter's, still in high school, and we're going to wait till she graduates. And, when does she graduate? Well, about 3 years from now. You're like, wait a sec, I thought you just said a year or two, but now you're saying 3. So yeah, I don't get into the house until I know that like Brady finally said, yeah, I think, by Christmas, I think that would be pretty cool.
And then once you get to the house, that's when you really establish the professionalism by asking kind of those niche questions that they never even thought about.
Give me an example.
Just like you talking about the furnace and heating and
Yeah,
all that type of stuff, how old the house is, all that crap.
Yep. I'll start to tackle the reasons, but yes, during the pre-qualification conversation, I'm going to ask about the age of the furnace, and I'm going to draw my own conclusions and just be ready to tackle it. Yes, you're correct.
During this initial conversation, would you bring up their financing situation, whether or not they refinanced?
So yeah, I would probably ask how much they owe. I would probably ask how much they owe on their house, if they have any sort of seconds, things of that nature. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It depends. There are some times where I go through and I do the pre-qualification. I send out the pre-listing packet, and then I go over to the house for a seller's consultation. And during the consultation, I'll get my laptop out and I'll do a seller's net sheet. Sometimes I'll do a seller's net sheet beforehand, but I don't like to give them the seller's net sheet before I go. And the reason being, and the reason why I don't really love to talk about it right then and there, is because every time you start to talk about proceeds and drawing up a seller's net sheet, it seems like that's when I prompt the seller to go, oh, well, could you send that over to me? I'd really like to know what I'd make off of the sale. And then if they get it from you and they're talking to another agent, and they get it from another agent who's willing to do 5%, you may never get the chance of actually interviewing for the job. So that's sometimes the hardest part with that, because I don't like to ask those questions too much on a pre-qualification, because it always tends to lead down the road of, well, how much do you think I would net? If I sold my home for $350,000, how much do you think I would walk away with? And that's when I say, why don't we tackle that when we get there? My script around that is, oh, you know what? I'm going to have that ready. However, before I see your house, the last thing I want to do is I want to give you a false sense of where your walk away or your take home money could be. You see, the reality is that, if the range of what your home is worth between $470,000 and $500,000, that's a big swing in what you're going to net. So until I get to your house to actually dive into an actual price of where we feel like we should list, why don't we do our net sheet then? Does that make sense, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? Usually it does, but that's my script. That help?
That's great. Yeah, sure did.
Because it does say up here, I think it does say, what do you owe left on your house, I believe. Yeah, how much do you owe on the property? It's not one I love to ask. It's not one I love to ask. It simply goes into commissions conversations, and it goes into everything that I pride myself on doing at the house. So let's talk about a pre-listing packet. All right. So pre-listing packets. I'm going to sit here and tell you that I need you guys to understand what they are. And I would tell you that they're a big thing, but getting started and spending your time and money on a pre-listing packet, I would spend more time on your pre-qualification, like role play conversation, and your actual presentation at the home. A pre-listing packet is something that you don't really need to talk around. This is something that you would typically send or drop off in person to the person's house. This is a pre-listing packet. This is something that the seller would go over and review before you sat down with them at the dinner table at their house for the actual consultation. And the pre-listing packet is really just kind of one of those game changers to help you solidify your professionalism, solidify them feeling comfortable working with you, and them understanding that you're the right professional for the job. Okay. So a pre-listing packet, what you're going to notice in here, it goes over a lot of like what the seller needs to do and things of that nature, right? So the first page in this one, this is just an example. There's plenty of examples on command in the design center. So it's all about the seller. If you just read a couple of these bullet points, it says, you know, it's all about you. I will help you by presenting all offers and advertising the terms and contingencies contained within. Like, it spells out our job. It spells out our duties that are pretty much already spelled out in our exclusive right to list. It's more of just a one-page fluff item that says, I'm here for you, even though it's all the stuff you have to do for them anyways, typically. Then getting ready to list. This is where, you know, if you talk to somebody over the phone and they have one of those houses where, you know, somebody really likes, you know, family, and they have, you know, pictures of like 4th generation cousins on their stairwell leading up to the bedrooms, and just this litany of like family portraits. You know, this is where you can kind of you don't have to be the bearer of bad news. The industry appreciates if you take down those photos. So you can mention it, and then in this get ready to list your home, this is where it'll mention stuff like that too. So recent sales, we talked about comparable homes. A lot of this stuff in the pre-listing is just reiteration from your pre-qualification, and then more about them, you know, just being prepared and understanding that there's a process to this, and it gives them a tangible thing to do, right? This already preps them for talking about, you know, where they want to price their home. I love this diagram. So what this diagram does is this has anybody that wants to, you come in with a range of 470 to 500, and they want to list their home at 530. This is the percentage of buyers looking at your home. If you're 15% over the comp range, there's only about 10% of all buyers that will actually be looking at your home. Those are the buyers that are getting beat out. Those are the buyers that, you know, may be unrealistic. Those are the buyers that want to make a lowball offer because they know your home's overpriced. So this ready to sell thing really gets their gears turning around, you know, being realistic when you walk in that door. So remember, a pre-listing packet is something you would either mail to them or drop off to their front porch. I think in this digital age and with COVID and everything that's going on, I think it would be acceptable to email to them. Not as powerful, and maybe not something they actually would go through, but a piece of paper, something that they can put down and put by their, you know, their nightstand or their dining room table, or look at, you know, that night while they're watching TV is most important. So this page here really gets their gears turning around, you know, where to list. You know, ready to sell. That's where we talk about decluttering and all of that. So here's questions for you. This is something, if they're actually reading it over, you always, no matter how you design your own pre-listing packet, you always want to make sure that you have some sort of questionnaire for them. Because again, when you get to the house and they have the pre-listing packet sitting there and they have that form filled out, guess who just went through every single thing that you asked them to go through? That type of person. The person that doesn't have it filled out, chances are they probably didn't even look at the pre-listing packet. They appreciated you dropping it off, or they appreciated it coming in the mail, but they may not have read it. It gives you an idea of who you're dealing with and a sense of who they are. And then you use about you. That's more talking about you. So that's, any questions on kind of the difference between pre-qualification, that's you and your questions, and then the pre-listing packet is something you send to them that it does all the heavy talking for you. Cool. So now when we're at the listing appointment, okay, I want to teach you guys today to land the intro. You've got to land this intro. You've got to, everything about what I'm about to share with you, it has set me apart. Bold, the class Bold, I don't know if any of you guys signed up for it and are taking it, but the class Bold, I got this script from there and it works every time. It's crazy how much you don't get asked, how long you been in the industry? How many homes have you sold? You don't get asked that question because of the way that this first intro is presented.
Bruce, before you get into that, how often would you say people actually look at the packet here?
They leaf through it.
Usually people look at it, but it's just a quick browse.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
What I've noticed is that the reason why the packet is the way the packet is, if you guys notice, it was only like, I think 6 or 7 or 8 sheets. The reason why that's like that is because it kind of helps you understand what's important to them again. So if they're curious about you, you can have, it's all about you right there. And then you save yourself that conversation a lot in the consultation. So if they're worried and nervous about who you are and how you're going to help them, they're going to probably want to, use that, or they're going to look at that. Or if they're curious about, getting their home ready, they're not sure if their home's ready, they're going to read more of that paper. Yeah, but to answer your question, really just more leafing through things, to be honest with you.
Perfect, thanks. All right, let's get this intro down.
Perfect. So what you do is you're gonna get up to the home, and then you're gonna knock on the door, and you're gonna say, "Hey, Mr. and Miss Seller, it's Bruce. We had an appointment at 8 p.m. It's 8 p.m. Or we had an appointment at 7, and it's just before." You want to make sure that you let them know that you are on time or before, and you're setting that professionalism that's you. Don't use that line if you're going to be late. You want to thank them for having you over. And then what I've learned to do, and I used to walk right in the front door and take my shoes off. I've learned that with different cultures, you might want to ask that right off the rip, and your shoes might need to stay outside. So I just kind of look at them. I thank them for having me over. And I just kind of looked out at my shoes, and I'll say, "Hey, let me take my shoes off. Do you want me to take them off out here or right inside the door?" If they say, no, just keep them on, you're fine. Walk in the door. And if the house is clean and well kept, take the darn things off, no matter how much they're telling you to keep them on. If the carpets are dirty enough to dirty the insides of your socks and your feet and your shoes when you leave, keep your shoes on if they're telling you to keep them on. Sometimes if they open up the door, if I walk up to the house and their front yard is the way I envision their house is going to look, I don't know if I ask right off the rip. I might walk in before I ask. But the shoes, taking that off, being courteous, showing them that you care about their home just as much as they do is key. Stating the time that you got there and understanding that you're earlier on time is going to be good and sets that professionalism. Then as soon as you get into the home, the next question you want to ask is, "Hey, where's your dining room table? I'd like to set my stuff down before we get started." You want to make sure that you get to a place where you guys have a table. Maybe it's a little, eating kitchenette table, dining room table. You want to make sure there's seats as well as like a countertop or table to put your stuff on. It's too casual and too relaxed in the living room. It's harder for them to look at papers. It's harder for them to share your computer screen. It really makes it uncomfortable. And what happens is when people are sitting and people are at a table and engaged, our minds go back to kind of school, like high school and elementary, and it gets our minds to start to be in that thought mode. So it's a sound principle to do something at the dining room table. Okay. But worst case scenario, do it in the living room, but try for the dining room table. So, "Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, hey, my name is Bruce. I really appreciate you guys having me over tonight. I know our appointment was at 8 and I know it's 8 o'clock. May I come in? Oh, hey, before I come in, I'm going to take my shoes off. Should I leave them out here or should I set them right inside the door?" "Bruce, come on in. You can set them right inside the door." "Great. Hey, before we get started, do you have a dining room table or a place that I can, we can sit and chat later? I just want to set my stuff down before we get started." "Yeah, great. Right this way." "All right. Hey, we're going to go over three main things. And so right now I'm standing up talking to them. I set my stuff down. Hey, we're going to go over three main things this evening. First, I'm going to take a tour around your home, and I want to make sure I see your home through the eyes of a buyer. So it's really important to me that if I could just walk myself through your home, it's really important to me that you don't guide me on this one just yet. I really want to make sure that you know that you're not going to be here when a buyer's here. And so for me to walk through the home, I'm going to just briefly take some notes, and we can talk about those later. And then at the end of our consultation, what I'd really like for you to do is then guide me through your home, pointing out all the features and all the highlights and everything that I need to advertise and market that will sell your home. Does that make sense, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? Jeffrey, you're going to say no, or I'm sorry, Brady, you're going to say no. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, hey, you know what? I know sometimes it's kind of weird that I'm just kind of walking through your home. You're more than welcome to follow me, but it's really important. And this is how important it is. I've been doing this so long that when a buyer comes into your home, and if there's something that they don't know or a nuance that they aren't sure about, you know what the problem with people is, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? It's that they don't ask enough questions. I'd hate for something very simple to turn off a buyer in which it'd be something that I can circumvent. So it's really important that I walk through your home. Come on, you can follow me right away. I call it the nickel tour. It takes less than 5 seconds. It takes less than 5 minutes. And then go around the home. Sometimes they're following you. Sometimes they're getting beer out of the fridge for you. Sometimes they're sitting at the table going over the pre-listing packet that they never went over the night before because they meant to and they forgot. You name it, but you need to walk through that home and you need to guide yourself. Don't let them talk much. Don't let them point out anything. If they do, just apologize and say, hey, I'm really, really, really sorry. And I really don't mean to be rude because I really want you to take me through your home. So far, your home is beautiful, but you're not going to be able to be here pointing up at the ceiling fan that you paid $400 for because my eyes were down here at the carpet stain. So I really want to make sure I walk through this house so I can see it through the eyes of a buyer. At the end, I really want you to point out how much you spent on that ceiling fan. I want you to point out the new windows, all of that. If I could please just walk through here and just kind of see it through the eyes of a buyer. I've never actually had to use that script. I never have to go that far, but it's important to just set that precedence because here's the key. You are really walking through it as the eyes of a buyer, especially if it's your first time. And you're going to make notes on all the questions, right? The ceiling leak that you saw in the texture in the drywall, the over the top fireplace that looks like it's like something from space. Like you want to ask, like, what is this thing? How does it work? And how much did you spend on it? So you're taking notes as you go throughout. Like take notes, good and bad. Carpet stains in upstairs hallway, large master bedroom. Secondary bedrooms are away from the master. Like those types of things. Just write stuff down that's so obvious. Just if they're following you, they're going to want to know what this sheet says. So you get back to the table and you say, okay, like I said, 3 main things tonight. I'm going to first walk through the home. Thank you. Second, I want to know kind of what kind of questions you have. I want to really make sure that we tackle what's on your mind right now. Lastly, we're going to go over the comparative market analysis in conjunction with the home selling process. And then after that, that's it. So just 3 main things. And we're already done with step 1. Let me ask, what kind of questions do you have for me? Is there anything burning that we need to just get off our chest right now? That's where you guys will know the focus will be. Sometimes they'll talk about the house, even though you told them you're going to take them on a tour. Sometimes they'll go into the logistics around, well, like how long does the transaction take? Like, do I need to be out of the home like right when they close? Like, how does all that work? They're going to want to know more about the process, right? So just asking that question and just making sure that they get their questions off their mind helps them listen to this next part.
Do you ask that before or after you do the tour?
I do the tour first.
Okay, tour always first, and then after you get the tour from them, you ask that question.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I think I just realized where I lost you guys. So I come in, I set my stuff down on the kitchen table, and I say, thanks, Mr. Miss Seller. And I'm standing up in front of them. Thanks for having me over yet again. We're going to go over three main things tonight. First, I'm going to go do a nickel tour of your home. Second, I want to answer any questions that you have. You know, I want to go over anything that's most important to you. And then third, I want to go over kind of the home selling process in conjunction with, you know, where we might sell your home. And that means we're going to go over this CMA. Does that make sense, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? Great. Okay, like I said, first, I want to go through and then I'll do my spiel about why it's important to me for me to see it through the eyes of a buyer, get back to the table, and then I'll answer their questions. Now, most of their questions, and I will say a large majority of their questions, I'm gonna answer with, oh, that's a great question. We're gonna table that kind of in through our next piece. I'm gonna make sure I detail that and I answer that when we go through the home selling process. Oh, okay, yeah, you wanna know where we're gonna price the home? Well, let's go over that when we go over the CMA, or the comparative market analysis. So most of their questions I'm gonna table, unless it's something like something that needs to be tackled. But it helps them understand that their questions are gonna get answered, and that way they start listening. That's all that second piece is about, is they have to be attentive when you go over the CMA and the selling process. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So there you go. Walk through the home. Some people use checklists. I actually just kind of go through and I take some notes. Checklists are perfectly fine. Whatever you have, when you take that nickel tour, have that sucker, have some notes, have something to write down. Because when I get back to the table, the second thing that I do is I flip that sheet over so they can't see what I wrote down. We're going to talk about it at the end. We're going to talk about it after and right around the time that I get, that I actually get the listing agreement signed. Okay. So before we go through this next piece and finish up with this class, I apologize, guys. I gotta hit the head real quick. If you guys need to use the restroom, do it. I can't wait right now. All right. For those of you watching the recording, I apologize. I probably should have paused it there. But we're going to jump through and we're going to go through the listing presentation. Okay. So ask questions in here. I'm going to give you guys a kind of a brief overview. I think that if you do this truly, again, I'm going to do a class on the presentation. So for this class, we're going to kind of go over and make sure we talk about, what you need to be prepared for. We won't really go and, just constantly, role play back and forth. It would just take too much time. So keep your eyes out. I'm going to do a class over the buyer's consultation as well as the listing consultation. I just haven't figured out how I want to do the listing consultation just yet. All right, listing presentation, right? So we've gone over things. We know that we've set the expectation that we're going to go over the selling process as well as the comparative market analysis. Guys, for your sake, I would start off with going through the CMA. I think that there's a lot of differences of opinion on this one. I'm on the side of going through the CMA first, ultimately a seller wants to usually net the most money. And so going through the CMA and tackling that, I find that if we can find a price that works, they're much more attentive to the selling process. If you go over the selling process first, the conversation around the CMA may cause some questions and comments and concerns that you may or may not have addressed in the seller's presentation. So either way you do it, it's perfectly fine. I tend to like to tackle the CMA. I really want to know kind of what type of person I'm dealing with and where I'm at. So the way I tackle the CMA and the brief script is I will go through and I'll say, here's kind of what a CMA is. Here's the comparable properties that I found. And so we'll go through and make sure that you ask the seller how they feel their house stacks up with the comparable properties. So we'll usually get my computer out and I'll go through and I'll navigate through the CMA. And then once I navigate through the CMA, I will just say, based upon these properties, where do you see your house falling in lines with not price, but quality of home? Well, I see it kind of being more like this one and that one, right? And if they're realistic around it, then that's probably where, right around where the price should be. So when they do that, what they're doing is they're kind of solidifying a price. They're kind of solidifying kind of where they want to be. And by doing that, it's super awesome and it's powerful for you, because when they say, this is where I think my house compares, and they say, and then when you get done with the CMA and you think, well, what do you think your house should list at? And they give you a price that's $20,000 over or $20,000 under, you can have that conversation around, I apologize. I guess I'm a little mistaken. I strongly feel like we could possibly get some more money for your home, because it does stack up with those ones that you talked about. Why is it important to you that we price it so low? And they may say something like, I got to get out of here. I didn't think it was going to be worth this much money. I just want to get out of here. And you say, okay, great. So what I hear you saying is that, it's more important for you to just get this thing sold quickly and get on with where you're going. Okay, great. Then maybe we make a compromise here. I strongly believe it could sell for a little more. If you want to list it at $20,000 less than, if you want to list it at $450 instead of $470, I'm happy to do so. I'm also happy to test the waters at $460 if you want. Let them kind of commit to that $450 like 2 and 3 times, right? Because if it's underpriced, that the most of the time the market's going to drive it back up to market value. So I'm perfectly fine with that. I just want to hear them say it 2 and 3 times. Now, if they want to price it over the market value or over the comparative range, then that's when I say, oh, help me understand, it sounded like your home stacked up to these over here. Is there any reason why you think your house would, cause it to sell for $20,000 more? Or do we just want to test the waters? Well, no, I want to test the waters and I want it to sell for $20,000 more. I think it stacks up to those, but I think that the market's going to bring me more money. You say, okay, great. So what I hear you saying is it's more about what you net out of the home than it is about you selling it quickly and getting to Baltimore. Is that correct? So it's okay for it to sit on the market for a little bit, right? Well, what do you mean sit on the market for a little bit? Oh, I didn't mean anything by it. I'm just saying usually what happens is when a home is priced over the comparative market range, what happens is buyers, they'll go in and they'll look at your house. They may like your house, and then their agent's going to go back to their office and they're going to run a comparable market analysis on the house. And as soon as they find out that it might be overpriced, they might not make an offer. They might make a lower offer, or they might be too afraid to offend you and they might not make an offer at all. And they might just sit on it and wait until you drop the price. And sometimes what happens is you might drop the price lower than they'd actually be willing to pay. And so sometimes just overpricing the house is going to cause it to sit. That's all I meant, is that you might, it might sit on the market for a month or two. And it's really going to start to stretch that timeline of getting into Baltimore by Christmas. So you can sandwich kinds of their motivation along with their unrealistic expectations and say, I'm perfectly fine listing it there. I just want to let you know it's going to sit. Okay. So I like to go over the CMA. I like to understand kind of who I'm dealing with. I like to tackle that price.
Question
Now,
for you, Bruce.
Yep.
I've heard some agents use a tactic when a client feels their home should be listed a little bit higher, of getting an appraisal, a seller's appraisal. Is that a tactic you've ever used? And I've also heard that sometimes when that is the case, that you can offer to rebate the cost of that appraisal at closing. Any experience with that, or any recommendations one way or the other?
Yeah. I'm not a do an appraisal and rebate at closing type of guy. Because, and here's the hardest part about it is, if they do get an appraisal done, and let's say that appraisal is more in favor of where they feel like it should be, I'm happy for them. But now you created this I'm against you kind of feel sometimes.
Okay.
And the other key piece is that appraisal does not stick, meaning the buyer can't use that appraisal. So let's just say, so if we got a comp range of 470 to 500, and that guy says, well, and maybe I didn't even offer this, but he says, well, I have an appraisal and the appraisal came back at 520. I will say the same things and I'll say, great, it looks like you had a really good appraiser. I still feel like it might sit, it might not. Based upon what you're showing me, I think that's fantastic. Here's the reality though, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. A buyer, when they make an offer on your home, most likely, unless they're a cash offer, they're going to be contingent upon the successful appraisal. And successful appraisal to a buyer would be it appraises for contract price. If it doesn't appraise for contract price, buyer can walk away from that property scot-free. They don't have to come up to your contract price. The contract also says that you don't have to sell your home for a penny less than contract price. So typically buyer and seller would go into negotiation, but really what I'm getting at, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is this appraisal is not going to stick with the buyer. The buyer still has to do their own appraisal. And in my comp range, I'm finding out that their appraisal might come in between 470 and 500. So I just want to make you aware that it may or may not appraise at 520. And if it doesn't, we have to be prepared that the buyer may ask you to come down in price. And if you're not willing to, that's perfectly fine. We'll terminate the contract and we'll put it back on the market and we'll go through the same process again. If we start to go into that second buyer, we may get another appraisal like that. So I just want you to be prepared and know all the pros and cons of any decision that you would make. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
Great. Well, let's list it at 520 then and see what happens. But I would say in about 2 weeks, if we don't have any offers and our showings start to turn down, I have to ask you if you're prepared to make some sort of price reduction.
That's something I would have to consider a little bit further.
Yeah, whatever they say, right?
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you're preparing them like, hey, after 2 weeks, I'm going to ask you to start having a price reduction conversation with me. So you're just setting an expectation, you're preparing them. In this situation, I would take the 520 listing. I probably would not take anything like 540 or 550. Just too unrealistic. Most of the time, it's a lot of headache. Most of the time, it's a lot of work for nothing. And then they could get frustrated with you. And then once your listing agreement is terminated, they just list it with somebody else after they finally got the realization that they should have listed it at 420. I'm sorry, 520. And they sell it for 520. And then they look at you like you weren't the guy that helped them, even though you were the entire time. So be careful taking too far of overpriced listings. But we'll get into that definitely during a seller presentation class. So okay. This is kind of the selling process, okay? This is kind of like, so you have that pre-qualification packet. Now it's the seller's guide, like the seller's process. I don't use a packet anymore like this. what I do is I use a flow chart now, but I know this packet still. I used to use it a lot. Guide to selling your home. Oh, this is your notes. So this is where I would have all of the notes ready from our first initial phone call, from things that I took down. Goals for today, we kind of already went over that. This is 42 pages, okay? Here's what I have learned to do and go over and use packets. Packets are awesome, especially when you're new. They keep you on track. My flow chart is identical to what my packet used to be. I just don't need one single page for every talking point anymore. I just see my flow chart, and that flow chart just helps me stay in alignment. So here's my flow chart. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what we're gonna need to do first is we're gonna need to order or get the home ready for photos. So going through your home, I can see that, you know, you're this way. I recommend this. I don't recommend that. Go ahead and do that project. Whatever kind of conversations you guys have had around, should they replace carpet? Shouldn't they? That sort of thing. Talk about getting the home ready. Then from there, the home needs to be ready before pictures. So all paint touch-ups, all of that stuff, all decluttering, show ready, probably better than show ready for photos, because at showings, you can hide dishes in the dishwasher, things of that nature. For photos, just have everything done. The closets are clean. All the dirty laundry is done and folded. That sort of thing you don't want to have in photos. Then after photos are done, it usually is about a 24-hour turnaround time from the time that you take photos to the time the photographers get it back to you. In the meantime, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm going to be putting the house in the MLS system, so that way when we get the photos back, I can import them and we can be ready to go. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, as we start to have buyers want to see your house, this is where I start to talk to them about how much notice they would need for showings. Would they like to receive feedback from the buyers? Would they like to approve all showings? Do they need a 2-hour notice required? Do they want a 4-hour notice, a 24-hour notice sometimes? This is where I talk to them about the nuances around showing. And so once we understand that, I will say, okay, now do you have a extra key? I'm gonna leave a lockbox at the home today. Put the key on the, or put the lockbox on the premises somewhere, put the key in the lockbox, show them the code, so that way if they ever need it, they can get into it. And then I go right into, as soon as we get a buyer that shows the home and likes the property, they're going to be making an offer. That offer may or may not be what we're looking for. And they're going to have a timeline that we should abide by and respond by. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that timeline isn't a response deadline, it's an acceptance deadline. But I pride myself on keeping professional with not only you, but other agents that I work with. And so if somebody sends us an offer with a 24-hour turnaround, I really want to make sure that we can have a time to talk within that 24 hours. So that way we can keep the buyer aware of what's going on and where we feel their offer is at. Does that make sense? And I use a lot of tie downs. Does that make sense? You're reading. So that way when they get an offer, they're not like, well, I can't talk today and I'm really tired from work and can we just tackle this tomorrow, right? We want to be courteous to the buyers and the buyers agents out there, because we want, somebody likes the house. You guys would not believe how many times I've seen a buyer not make an offer on a house because of something petty that that seller did, whether or not the seller had viable reason to do so. So for instance, I almost went under contract on a house a couple of weeks ago, but the seller side, they didn't get back to us, or they didn't make a decision on multiple offers until like 2 days after our acceptance deadline. 2 days after they advertised online that they would get back to us by. As soon as my buyers got so upset, they called me and said, hey, resend our offer right now. We're moving on. We're going to go see other homes. We're not dealing with a seller that's going to do this throughout the entire transaction. As I'm sending off an email to the seller telling them that we're not going to be keeping our offer in play, I missed a call and missed a voicemail telling us that we got the bid and they're going to be countering us. So I send the email off. I check my voicemail. I freak out. I call the selling agent right away and I say, hey, disregard my email. Hopefully my buyers were still in this. They're a little upset it took this long. I totally get, and they had some excuse. The seller was working and da 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 da. Call the buyer back all excited, and the buyer's like, no, I told you, we're not doing this. That's how petty things can get. So set that expectation with your seller that even in a seller's market, I mean, I'm pretty sure that I found out later that they probably missed out on about $4,000 because we were $4,000 over the next offer. It hasn't closed yet, but I'm over here now. I got to go back to work because my buyers were so close to going under contract. They've made 3 different offers and they pulled their offer off the table for something so small. It frustrates me, but I get it. The sellers were frustrating me too. So just have that conversation with your seller. Let them know that throughout this process, you're going to be communicating with them. And that's where I talk about the communication process when I talk about an offer coming in. And then what I'll say is from there, once we go under contract, this is why you pay me. This is why you hire me. There's going to be very little things that I'm going to need from you. I'm going to need you to sign a few documents. I'm going to need you to answer a few questions, maybe from the title company. But our job is to transfer this title work from your name into the buyer's name through the title company. They may have some things for you, but in the meantime, the only other thing that you're going to have to do is get out of the house for the buyer's appointments. So the buyers are going to schedule inspections. They're going to schedule the appraisal. And depending upon what they want you to fix, we can negotiate through the inspection. Depending upon where the appraisal value comes in at, we may or may not need to negotiate the purchase price of the home. You see, and I know we talked about this in our CMA, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, but if the property doesn't appraise at the contract price, buyer has the right to cancel the contract. Seller has the right to cancel the contract. Buyer and seller both have the right to negotiate to see if they can come to terms on a purchase price. So what I'm getting at is now that we're under contract, I'm going to reach out to you on a periodic basis to keep you informed of what's going on. But a lot of it's just going to be questions and requests. So congratulations, you made it through the hard part. That's pretty much what's going to happen for about a 30 to 45 day process. And we're going to negotiate through that. And then once we close, the buyers are going to take possession of your house that same day. So we need to make sure that you're out of the home. The home is cleaned up and in broom swept condition, and that you have all keys and garage door openers ready to get to closing and get your money, and the buyer can move in. Any questions about the process, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? So the selling process, you can talk about quickly, a lot quicker than you can with a buyer, because the buyer is really the one doing a lot of that stuff. The buyer is the one conducting the inspection. The buyer is the one sending over their objection. We're just responding to it with what we will and won't do. So on the seller side, it tends to be a lot easier and a lot more lax, which is why at the end of this, I mean, by now I'm already at their house for at least an hour and a half. So that last part is where I kind of go through all of that process, if you will. This packet, like I said, I stopped using such a big packet. 42 pages, it was just too overwhelming. There was so much to go over, and most of the time I ended up stopped going over it. I brought it with me, printed all of it out, spent all that money on it, and I would go through and I'd be like, okay, this page, we already talked about that, we already talked about, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here you go. And we would go through it, and it'd be fine, but I bet you 10 to 1, I spent a lot of money on print, and they never even looked at it after I left. So I use a 1-page sheet now. So we'll go through, this is all 42 pages of this. Take a look. So I'm not saying don't use one, and I'm not saying don't go through this. Take out of these 42 pages what you want to use, how you want to explain and accentuate your listing presentation. Any questions, guys? We're really wrapping up. Sorry, I'm kind of just going through here. So the next thing that I would do is I would go through and I would present to them the listing contracts. So I'd go paragraph by paragraph through the listing contracts, and I'd work to get them signed, and I'd work through any objections that I had. But like I said, for the purpose of this video, if you're worried about how to explain the seller's contract, come to Scripps with us on Wednesdays and Thursdays, 8:30 to 9. If you're worried about objection handlers for sellers, come to Scripps with us Wednesdays and Thursdays. I'll make time out of my day to do scripts for you guys. Just for the purpose of this video, we're not going to go through every single seller objection script, but just make sure you understand. Because actually, yeah, here's where there's a one little pager in here. Make sure you know your objections. Here's the very common ones. We're not sure just yet. Your commission seems a little too high. We'd like to sleep on it. We're interviewing other agents before we make a decision. How long have you been in the business? How many sales have you done? Why are you charging 6% and the last agent I talked to charges 5%? We're thinking about going with a discount broker so we can save some money. There's so many objections. Like I said, we don't have another hour to tackle all of those. But if you guys need help with that, reach out. I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much. Any questions before I stop the video recording?
When you set the agenda in the beginning about what the process is going to look like for the sellers, do you not bring up the contract? And why so?
Not typically, no. Okay. I keep that as part of the quote unquote selling process.
Yeah, and then you just mention it at the end once you get through.
So yeah, so basically the transition, Tim, would be, okay, here's my 1-page outline of how the selling process works.
Yep.
We talk about showings and we get to closing and say, okay, great. So is there any other questions now that we've gone over pretty much everything? Okay, great. So in order for us to get started, we do have to have some sort of written agreement, and what I call a loyalty agreement. In order for me to start paying for photos and marketing dollar and putting a sign in the yard and a lockbox on your door, we just need to go through this loyalty agreement really quick. And then I just start going through it. Like I don't really ask them, are you ready to go through it? I just say, we're going to go through it. And then I just read it, paragraph by paragraph. So I'm going to be working with you as a seller's agent. I do hang my license under a multiple person firm, which is Keller Williams. Make sure your names are spelled correctly and just.
Yeah. Just walk through it. Yep. Perfect.
Cool, guys. Anything else?
You get like a firm objection like you did in that example that you gave, and they're like no, like we're done. I already told you we're done. Do you ever try and like win them back, or is that if they're super firm like that, are you just like okay?
Where was the objection? Are you talking about on the phone or at the house?
When you gave that example of what happened to you just the other day with the buyers, and they're like, I don't want to. They came back and they're like, no, we're done. We don't want to even like consider that offer or like give them our offer anymore. Do you even come back and say, oh, well, is there any way I can bring you back in, or do you just leave it?
So what I tried to do, and that's a really good question. What I tried to do on that one was, hey, look, I completely get it. Like I've been very frustrated that I wasn't able to even give you guys an update over the last 48-hour period. And as your agent, as your representative, I can't say that you're wrong. That transaction may be difficult, but here's what I know. I know that that's what I do. That's my job. And you don't have to deal with that. I know that you kind of do right now, but when we go under contract, the reason why the dates and deadlines are in the contract are for both parties to abide by and both parties to continue moving the can down the road. So I don't find that that's going to be an issue when we go under contract with these people, because we're all bound by the same dates and deadlines. So if you want to pull your house, or if you want to pull the offer off the table, I'm perfectly okay with that. I just think that the reason why you're doing it, we're going to be able to kind of get around that once we actually go under. And if they still say no, I'll say, hey, you know what? I'm okay with that still. Would you guys want to just maybe change our offer and throw in a lower offer just to see what they say? Could piss them off, but I mean, hell, they've already pissed us off. Do you want to just try and give them a little bit less price? Would that help? Okay. And sometimes they're like, yeah, let's piss them off. Let's go 10 grand under what we were just at. Okay, great. It's super easy for me to change it in my system, send it over. Listing agent calls me and say, hey, look, you irritated us. Counter us back at full list price and I'll put it in front of my buyer. But this is where we're at. So if I get the counter, great. Because then my buyer does have to make a decision. And usually when you put paper in front of somebody, after you've already said, hey, look, they've had time to calm down, right? Because they've already been communicating. Sometimes the buyer will sign that counter. Sometimes you won't get a counter and you piss the seller off and you accomplish what the buyer wanted anyways. It's a game out there, guys. It's a big game, and it's incredible how many people let emotions get the best of them. It's incredible how many people get very petty over the smallest things, and it's very odd how I say odd, but now after 6 years of doing this, I realize there's no stopping. We are going to be therapists. You are marriage counselors. Congratulations, you just got your marriage counseling license. Like it happens so often. It's so incredible to me how a contract before that, I mean, they were devastated. They couldn't believe they lost out. Complete and utter devastation. Then we see the third house that we make an offer on that they blatantly tell me they're so happy they lost out on their second offer because the third house was so much better. And then they decide not to go with it because the sellers pissed them off and they took too much time because they had 13 offers on the table. Like, people, do you not want to get into the house? So, yeah, be careful out there. It's just one big game. Great, guys. I'm stopping the